Welcome to Life Stories, where we explore real-life moments filled with emotion, resilience, and profound lessons. In today's story, we follow Judge Emily Carter as she navigates a tense and unjust encounter at the courthouse checkpoint. Through her grace, strength, and unwavering commitment to accountability, she reminds us of the power of standing up for dignity and fairness in the face of prejudice. Join us as we uncover the deeper truths behind this ordinary yet extraordinary day in her life. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more inspiring stories like this one. The morning light streamed through the tall glass windows of the Jackson County Courthouse, painting streaks of golden warmth across the marble floors. Judge Emily Carter stepped out of her car, clutching her leather bag with a mix of resolve and weariness. Today was no ordinary day. It was sentencing day for one of the most scrutinized cases in her career, a case that had gripped the media, polarized opinions, and invited relentless public scrutiny. As she approached the main entrance, her heels clicked rhythmically against the pavement, each step echoing her determination. At the security checkpoint stood Officer Mike Stevens, a man known for his brusque demeanor and rigid adherence to the letter of protocol, though many whispered his actions often veered into something more insidious. Emily had encountered him before in passing, but today, there was an air about him that was different. Something sharp and uninviting. I'm going to need to see some identification," he said, his voice carrying an edge that was too pointed for a routine interaction. Emily blinked, momentarily taken aback. Her position as a judge was well known within the courthouse. The badge clipped to her blazer should have been sufficient. But she reached into her bag to retrieve her ID, her fingers brushing against its familiar edge. "Of course," she replied calmly, handing it over. Stevens scrutinized the card as if inspecting a counterfeit bill, his eyes flicking back and forth between the ID and her face. A smirk played at the corner of his mouth. "This could be fake," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Emily's chest tightened, but she maintained her composure. "Officer Stevens, I assure you, it's not. If you check the records, you'll see my name clearly listed on today's docket." But Stevens wasn't satisfied. He waved her aside, gesturing toward a secondary scanner. "Step over here. We'll need to go through an additional check." The words struck her as both unnecessary and deliberate, each syllable laced with a subtle challenge to her authority. Emily hesitated, her gaze locking onto his. She could see it clearly now, the faint glint of power being exercised for power's sake. As she complied, stepping toward the scanner, a group of courthouse staff paused to observe. Their curious glances made her acutely aware of the unfolding scene. It wasn't the inconvenience that stung, it was the indignity of being treated as though she didn't belong in the very place where she wielded justice. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, her voice even but firm. Stevens leaned against the counter, his posture deliberately casual, as though relishing the moment. "Just routine, Judge. You understand. Routine." The word echoed in her mind, hollow and devoid of truth. Emily could feel the weight of the moment settling over her shoulders. She had spent years advocating for fairness and equity in her courtroom. But now, here she was stripped of her dignity by a man hiding behind a uniform and a thin veneer of protocol. She glanced at the clock mounted on the wall. Time was slipping away, and the courtroom was waiting. Yet, as much as she wanted to move forward, she knew she couldn't let this slide. "Officer Stevens," she said, her voice soft but with a sharp undertone that stopped him mid-motion. "I respect the importance of security measures, but I also recognize when someone is being subjected to unnecessary scrutiny. Is there a reason why I'm being treated differently from other courthouse personnel?" For a brief moment, his confident smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. But it was fleeting, and he recovered quickly. "Just following protocol." Emily's eyes softened, though her resolve did not. She let out a quiet sigh, the weight of years of understanding and restraint filling the space between them. Protocol, she repeated thoughtfully. It's a powerful word. Isn't it? It can shield us from accountability or guide us to do what's right. The choice, of course, depends on how we wield it. Her words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. Stevens shifted on his feet, his bravado now tinged with discomfort. By this time, the interaction had drawn the attention of others passing through the checkpoint. Emily could feel their eyes on her, some filled with sympathy, others with quiet admiration for the way she was handling the situation. In moments like this, Emily thought of her mother, a woman who had faced countless indignities in her life yet always emerged with grace. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, "People will test you, Emily. They'll try to strip away your dignity, but they can't take what you don't give them." Steeling herself, she took out her phone, her fingers steady as she began recording the interaction. "Officer Stevens, I believe we're done here. Please return my badge." Her action caught him off guard. The shift in power was palpable now, the scales tipping in her favor. Stevens hesitated, glancing around for support. But none came. The weight of her unwavering composure left him visibly unsettled. He cleared his throat, his hand hovering uncertainly over her badge. Now. Please, she interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. As he handed it back, his fingers brushed against hers briefly, and she could feel the tension radiating from him. It wasn't just about this moment. She realized. It was about something deeper, his insecurities, his biases, his own struggles with power and control. Emily gave him a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement that the interaction had ended. She straightened her blazer and walked past him, her head held high. The encounter had left her shaken. Yes. But it also reminded her of the importance of standing firm in the face of injustice, no matter how small or insidious. As she entered the courthouse, the distant hum of the courtroom reached her ears. The world inside awaited her, a place where she had the power to shape outcomes and challenge the very biases she had just endured. For Emily, this was more than a confrontation. It was a lesson in resilience, a reminder of why she had chosen this path in the first place. As Judge Emily Carter entered the courthouse lobby, she couldn't shake the feeling of frustration clinging to her. The humiliation she had just endured lingered like an uninvited shadow, a sharp reminder that no title or accomplishment could insulate her from bias. But she wasn't one to let indignities fester unaddressed. She glanced at the security checkpoint behind her and noticed Officer Stevens watching her retreat. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between defiance and unease. Emily paused, adjusting her bag on her shoulder as she turned back, a calm determination settling over her. She approached him once more, her footsteps measured and deliberate. The quiet murmur of courthouse activity faded into the background, leaving only the tense air between them. "Officer Stevens," she began, her voice steady. "I believe we need to have a conversation about what just happened." Stevens raised an eyebrow, his bravado returning as he crossed his arms over his chest. "I was just doing my job. There's no need to make this a big deal." Emily's gaze didn't waver. Doing your job doesn't include singling out individuals for additional scrutiny without cause. What you did was not protocol, it was personal. His posture stiffened, and for a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. The tension between them thickened, drawing the attention of others nearby. Emily was aware of the eyes on her, but she stayed focused, channeling the composure she had mastered over years of navigating tense courtroom proceedings. "Let me be clear," she continued, her voice firm but without malice. "I've worked here long enough to know how security operates. Today, your actions were an abuse of the authority entrusted to you. That's not just unprofessional, it's unacceptable." Stevens opened his mouth to respond, but Emily raised a hand to stop him. "Before you argue, let me finish. This isn't about me as a judge. It's about the precedent you're setting. If someone else, a young attorney, a court clerk, even a member of the public, had experienced what I just did, Would they have felt safe? Would they have felt respected? Her words struck a chord. Stephen's confident facade cracked slightly, his eyes darting toward his colleagues. A few of them were watching, their expressions a mix of curiosity and subtle disapproval. Emily could feel the shift in the room. She had witnessed it countless times in her courtroom, the moment when the truth cut through defensiveness. Forcing reflection, she reached into her bag, pulling out her phone. "I recorded our earlier interaction," she said, holding it up. "Not because I want to make this a spectacle, but because accountability matters. I intend to bring this to the attention of your superiors. Not to punish you, but to ensure this behavior isn't repeated." The words were measured, but their weight was undeniable. Stephen's jaw tightened, and he looked away, his bravado now entirely replaced by discomfort. An older officer, James Harris, stepped forward from his station. His silver hair and calm demeanor carried an air of authority that immediately commanded attention. "Judge Carter," Harris said, his voice even, "I apologize for any inconvenience you've experienced. I assure you, this is not how we conduct ourselves here." Emily turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you, Officer Harris. I appreciate your acknowledgement. But apologies alone won't suffice. We need to ensure this behavior is addressed and corrected." Harris nodded, casting a pointed glance at Stevens. "It will be. You have my word." Emily looked back at Stevens, who now seemed smaller, almost boyish in his discomfort. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes beyond arrogance, perhaps shame, or even regret. "I'll leave it in your hands, Officer Harris," she said, lowering her phone. "But know that I'm not doing this to humiliate anyone. I believe in accountability because it's the only way we grow." As she walked away, the tension in the air began to dissipate. Emily felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, disappointment, and a renewed sense of purpose. She had always known that change wasn't easy, that it often required uncomfortable confrontations and hard truths. What she hadn't anticipated was the profound reminder of her own humanity, that even in her role as a judge, she could still be vulnerable, still be tested. And yet, in the face of that test, she had chosen not just to stand her ground, but to rise above it. In that moment, Emily realized the encounter wasn't just about a checkpoint or an officer's behavior. It was about the larger lesson it carried: the power of standing firm, the courage to demand accountability, and the empathy to offer a path forward, even to those who faltered. As Judge Emily Carter made her way toward the courtroom, she couldn't help but reflect on what had just transpired. Her heart was still heavy with the mix of frustration and resolve that had carried her through the confrontation with Officer Stevens. She had faced challenges before, far more complex and demanding ones, but there was something deeply personal about this particular moment. It wasn't the first time she had been underestimated, and she doubted it would be the last. The sound of approaching footsteps broke her thoughts. She turned to see Officer James Harris, the older officer who had intervened earlier, walking toward her. His expression was calm but serious, the kind of demeanor honed from years of experience and understanding the nuances of people and power. "Judge Carter," he called softly, his voice low enough to ensure their conversation remained private. Emily stopped, giving him her full attention. Harris gestured toward a quieter corner of the hallway, away from the bustle of the courthouse morning. She followed, curious but composed. "I wanted to apologize again for Stephen's behavior," he said, his tone carrying genuine remorse. "It's not reflective of how we're trained to handle these situations. I take full responsibility for not addressing this earlier." Emily studied him for a moment, noting the sincerity in his eyes. "I appreciate your candor, Officer Harris," she replied. "But this isn't just about Stevens or me. It's about a culture that allows moments like this to happen. Without accountability, they'll keep happening." Harris nodded, a faint sigh escaping his lips. "You're absolutely right. And I've seen it myself, too many times. In fact, it's why I've stayed on the force as long as I have. I believe we can do better. But sometimes it takes moments like this to remind us of the gaps we still need to address. Emily crossed her arms, her expression softening. You stepped in when it mattered. That tells me you're someone who values doing the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable. I respect that. Harris smiled faintly, the lines around his eyes deepening. That means a lot coming from you, Judge. I've followed your work for years. You're known for your fairness and your ability to see people for who they truly are, beyond their mistakes. The comment caught Emily off guard, and for a moment, she felt a flicker of warmth amidst the morning's tension. Thank you, Officer Harris, she said softly. That's what I strive for in my courtroom. But it's not always easy when you're on the receiving end of the bias. Harris nodded. It never is. But the way you handled yourself today, it's a lesson. Not just for Stevens, but for everyone who witnessed it. Myself included. Before they could continue, a soft chime echoed through the hallway, signaling that court would soon be in session. Emily adjusted her bag, her resolve renewed. I need to get to my courtroom, she said, extending a hand toward Harris. But I hope this isn't the end of our conversation. Real change takes collaboration. Harris shook her hand firmly. I'll make sure this doesn't end here. Judge, you have my word. As Emily walked toward the courtroom, she felt a sense of closure settling over her. The confrontation with Stevens had been unsettling, but it had also sparked something important, a dialogue about accountability, respect, and the quiet power of leading by example. Inside the courtroom, the familiar hum of anticipation greeted her. The weight of the day's case loomed ahead, but she carried with her the knowledge that, in some small way, she had made a difference before even stepping to the bench. For Emily, that was the essence of her work, not just delivering verdicts, but living the values she upheld in her court. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Thank you for joining us on Life Stories as we explored Judge Emily Carter's journey of resilience, accountability, and empathy. Her story is a powerful reminder of the importance of standing firm for what's right and the quiet strength it takes to create meaningful change. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with others. And be sure to subscribe to our channel to stay updated with our latest videos, where we bring you more heartfelt and thought-provoking tales from everyday life. See you next time.